Good afternoon. I'm Jim Ray with the Road to the Autry Masters, talking about the artists of the Masters of the American West. Very pleased to have with us today Brenda Kingery from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you very much. It's nice to talk to you, Jim.
So Brenda is new to the Masters this year. We discovered her actually at the Briscoe show last year. She is a Chickasaw Indian. Hopefully we'll learn a little bit about that. And she has a very, very unique, kinetic, I would say, style of art, which we're going to have an opportunity to see. So, Brenda, I like to start these conversations out and learn a little bit about your artistic upbringing. You might also share with us some of your upbringing as a member of the Chickasaw tribe. So what can you tell us?
Well, that comes out in all of my paintings, of course. As an artist, I think I started out when I was 3 and didn't know it. But by the time I started school, teachers were calling my mother and telling her that they had a baby artist. And so they said, please don't change her at all. Don't give her any instruction. Let her just play until she's molded. And that happened. And then I had luckily, fortunately, a scholarship to University of Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And that would be in the art department. And that's when I actually started as a grown-up artist and learning techniques, etc. But by that time, I was already immersed in a great deal of Native American studies, just being with my grandmother, who was Chickasaw. And she had been a house mother at Bacone Indian College and under Dick West, actually.
Oh, okay.
And she took creative writing when she was 62. And so the students gave her paintings. So I have paintings from the students now that were on my walls. So as I walked by, as I lived, there were those paintings. And those are some of the greatest influences on my work. I married Tom at 19, and he was an Air Force pilot. And we did everything wrong at OU. I had 2 children by the time I graduated. And then we went to Okinawa. And so I decided that I would get a doctorate in Asian studies, and actually did get a master's, came back and got a master's at OU in fine arts. But I wanted to get that doctorate. And so I had a fellowship to the East-West Center when Tom was in Vietnam. And he said not to worry, that he could get a good assignment and I could finish that up. And as life has it, it worked out that we got Lubbock, Texas instead of Hawaii.
A little different from Okinawa.
Very different, but it turned out closer to Oklahoma. And my mom, who called and said, hey, why don't you come back to a powwow? And so I started out with a powwow when I was little, and it ended up with a powwow till now, that it's been a great influence on my work. The other influence, of course, was almost 7 years in Okinawa. And I did a lot of work. I did my master's thesis on folk art with Ryukyu Islands, the small islands. And in all of my paintings, I talk about people, I call them the people who survived, occupation or Holocaust, or all of the things that happen to us, whether we choose to have them happen or not. So that's in my paintings.
So we find you in the Masters of the American West, also in the Night of Artists over at the Briscoe Museum in San Antonio. In terms of the span of your career, what took you up to that kind of premier level of exhibitions?
Well, I've been working as a professional artist for forever, for always. And so I was in a lot of the galleries for a long time, and I show my work in Paris and DC and Oklahoma, of course. And the Chickasaws had a show called Visual Voices. And one of the exhibitions was at the Briscoe. And Michael Duchemin was nice enough to look at my work and say, golly, let me introduce myself. And I was so nice of him to invite me to the Briscoe. So I really am kind of a newcomer.
Well, that was the impression that my wife and I had at the Briscoe last year when we saw your work and said, golly, let's invite her to the Masters. It's not quite that simple, but we do keep our eyes out as we go around from show to show, looking for artists that are different and innovative and distinctive, and yours certainly checked off all of those boxes. So when the group that talks about who we're going to invite to the Masters sat down, we all kind of unanimously agreed that you should be included in that group. So welcome to the Masters. So speaking of that, let's talk about some of the works that that you're preparing for us. I think the first one is Woodland 10. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Woodland 10, what I did in the 3 paintings that you're getting, actually there's 4, but the 3 larger pieces are all different eras of my life. This particular one describes the powwows, and some of the images in there are circles, and you'll see those in most of my paintings. And those can be silver pieces, they can be imagination, dreams, they can be faces, they can be all kinds of things that represent in the circle. And it started out, I also work in Honduras. And so going through the mountains of Honduras in the bus, you know, I'm tired and I'm daydreaming, and I see in these spotted little circles. My husband and I take photographs of powwow in Oklahoma. That's how we got there. My mom invited us. That would be Red Earth powwow in Oklahoma, and of course other places as well. But I was fascinated with actually the dance and the movement in the paintings. I'm interested in the textiles and how they move and they change and they move against each other. And that's the painting. So I'm not trying to recreate regalia. I'm taking pieces of regalia and putting them together almost like a tapestry. And by the way, the work is all by hand, and it could be 25 to 35 layers of small lines and images. And so the poles are in all of my paintings, and you'll see those there. The Itifabasa Olitapa, which is basically a sacred pole that was for directions. And that's a story, the story of our migration story, and that's in the other painting. But the poles can also represent the years that I was in Japan with the samurais and their banners as they marched, or in South America with poles. And so it's kind of classic, could even be a Good Shepherd pole. So in all of those lines, there has something to do with leading and protection.
Yeah, you've just introduced several new layers of imagery into the description of your work, and it is nothing but movement. I mean, the work is just it's almost like the swirl of a hurricane of movement in your painting. It's quite amazing. Copper Faces, I think, is another one that you're working on.
Yeah, and that one is the one I was telling you earlier. That's the one of the migration story. And that's such a wonderful story. But we started with our sacred pole, and we were moving towards Mississippi. And the last story, it's hard to tell all of it quickly. But basically, it's a migration story of following the pole every night. And if it would lean one way, that's the way we would go the next time. And that was when we were Choctaw and Chickasaw together. And we made the travel till we got to the Mississippi. We also had a white dog that went with us for protection. And we also had Abba Banili, which was our great creator who gave us protection on that way. When we got to the Mississippi, we had a fuss with the Choctaws. So we parted, and the Chickasaws went on to the homelands. And I talk about that a lot because the Chickasaws, my generation, or actually younger than me, I think I'm the elder, we all went after an exhibit at Museum of contemporary art in Mississippi. We all went to Tupelo, back to the homelands, because we wanted to see where our ancestors were. And I can go back, and there's a monument to my grandfather from 8 generations ago. I can go back and see a
Wow.
place where my family started. So for me, I'm catching up. I'm learning a lot of history out of this as well as the paintings. So all of my paintings are storytelling. And the point of that is, I think we're storytellers. That's easy.
Yep. Night Arbor is the other large piece that you've worked on. What can you share with us about that?
CSAM. Chickasaws have a CSAM, Southeastern Native Americans exhibition every year. It's an invitational, and it's really fun because there's a lot of different tribes that compete in this sort of exhibition. And the pretty part of it, it's run by Chickasaws, and we have grape dumplings, and we have pashofu, which is a millet, sort of a, well, it's really corn, but a feast. And then there are arbors, and the arbors have leaves on the top, and they're poles. Again, the poles. And in that painting, the poles are green because they're like trees. And after you do the stomp dance or you're dancing, you might go and rest under that arbor. And so in my imagination, I can see at night when the dance is most beautiful, I can think of stars and sitting under that arbor. So I'm imagining and daydreaming in that one too.
Very good. And finally, your miniature is, and correct me if I get this wrong, Sigismundo, Prince of Poland?
Yes, and I love poetry. And I did a series, I do different series of paintings. I've done series on liturgical robes and series on different things. And this is one of a series I did on Sigismundo. It was just a play done in the 1600s. And the poetry of it, I'll just give you the quote: "Life is a dream at best, and even dreams themselves are dreams." And then I added to that, "The new world is mine." So that's what this is, little tiny dream painting is about.
Well, very good. I'm sure everyone will be quite excited to see these both on this video and in real life at the Masters in the American West. So talk to us a little bit about the creation of your artistic conception for a work. How does that process work?
Well, that's the part I can give to Okinawa, because I spent a lot of years. I went to graduate school at Ryukyu University, and there we did sumie, which is simile washes.
Yeah.
And during that process, that's how I lay out a composition, which is quite different from everyone else with preconceived notions. My only preconceived part is I do take photographs of the powwow, and as you can see in the paintings, I have little snippets of pieces of regalia. Nothing to represent one particular tribe, sometimes, but not usually. So the washes are the ones that lay out the composition before I ever start. And then it's when I begin the layers. So the work is working me. It's the opposite, you see. I don't have a preconceived idea, which always keeps the work
very interesting
ahead of me.
So it is actually providing you with feedback about what direction this ought to take.
It always does, and it's always fresh that way.
That's very interesting.
And so, yeah, but it's much more complicated because you cannot you can't orchestrate it.
It's almost it's similar in concept to the way a lot of stone sculptors work, where they look at a piece of stone and they say, "I see something in there." And they begin to work the stone towards the image that they have in their mind, and the stone takes it in its own direction. In many cases, it's like, you wanted to put a wing there, you can't get there from here. So you're going to have to go a different direction.
Yeah. And the same with glazes and ceramics. You know, the Asian ceramics are famous for their glazes, and that's because they were all accidents. They weren't preconceived again. They were done after the firing was done, and you had to wait to kind of see how the end would come out.
Yeah, true. definitely. So over the course of your career, how has your process evolved?
Well, that's interesting too. I'm getting to be an elder, and that's been kind of amazing because you would think that you retire, but honestly, this is the best of the best because I've accumulated through the years a lot of mistakes, a lot of
They call that wisdom.
well, sometimes, but I'm loving this period because I'm calling up years, and it takes that to do what I'm doing now. And it's the hardest work I've ever done too, by the way. This is not the easiest part, it's the hardest part.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, this has been an amazing story to listen to. We thank you so much for joining us here on the road to the Autry Masters, and look forward to seeing you out in Los Angeles in February.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.